The accident at Unit 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant destroyed the reactor core. At the time of the explosion, no one knew what a huge release of radiation in the environment could do, so it was decided to build a concrete sarcophagus around the fourth unit, which would hide the entire emergency unit underneath. But the question of what is left under the sarcophagus, even after many years, excites many people. Everyone remembers the story of this helicopter that fell right inside the future sarcophagus. The machine crashed in October 2, 1986, when the crew was working on the roof of the Chernobyl NPP blocks. 2017. During the dismantling on the roof of the engine room under the sarcophagus, the wreckage of this helicopter was found. But apart from the helicopter, the sarcophagus hides a lot of facts, from which it becomes uncomfortable. For example, many people do not understand what caused the destruction of the sarcophagus and why it is dangerous. To understand what is going on with sarcophagus, you need to know how it was built and what happened before it was built. In the first day after the accident, efforts were focused on reducing radioactive emissions from the destroyed reactor and preventing even more serious consequences. For example, there were fears that the coal meltdown would occur due to residual fuel heat in the reactor. Mortar material could have penetrated into the flooded room beneath the reactor and caused another release of radioactivity. Measures were also taken to prevent the melt from penetrating the ground beneath the reactor. Within a month, mining dug a 136-meter tunnel under Unit 4. It became oblivious to everyone. Without eliminating the fire in the reactor and sealing it, it would be impossible to start work on the ground. Therefore, only pilots were to be relied upon. Now few people know that to eliminate the fire in the reactor of Chernobyl NPP, it was proposed to bring a hose with water from Pripyat, fix it on a helicopter and pump water into the smoldering reactor. But it is good that this idea was abandoned. Therefore, even before the start of work at this shelter site, in order to reduce the number of emissions began to drop from helicopters in the reactor shaft materials, they are designed to localize the source of emissions. 45 sorties were made on the first day. May 1, the number of flights was increased 15 times. Just imagine, in 2 weeks, more than 15,000 tons of materials were dumped on Unit 4. Of them, almost 7,000 lead, 3,500 tons of marble chips, 2,000 tons of sand and many other components. About the sarcophagus. The first sarcophagus was erected over the destroyed 4 block and the cost of life and health of almost 100,000 workers of record time. The entire construction took only 206 days from the moment of the accident. It was done to prevent the spread of radioactive elements around the world. After all, according to scientists' estimates, more than 80% of radioactive fuel still remains under the sarcophagus. The shocking pace of the works could not but affect their quality. Technologies were not fully compliant with and not in everything. For example, some of the support beams were simply lying on the ruins of the destroyed reactor, and part of the roof was covered with large pipes that were not even fixed. During the construction of the sarcophagus, the support beams, as well as the main beam, were placed on explosion-damaged structures and supports whose strength could not be reliably established due to extremely high radiation levels. Floors, roofs and stairs were decontaminated, then reinforced and additional structures were erected. This way, radioactive debris was prevented from being carried outside, and most of this dangerous debris remained inside. If you think that the sarcophagus is just a big concrete box, you're wrong. It is a complex engineering structure was designed practically on the fly. No one in the world has ever done anything like it. From 1986 to this day, no more than 60% of the rooms inside the shelter have been explored. The remaining 170 rooms are inaccessible because of extremely high radiation fields or because of impenetrable barriers created by the explosion and concrete poured by the sarcophagus builders. This unexplored zone forms today the main risks from the destroyed Chernobyl Unit 4. While the sarcophagus was under construction, reconnaissance and diagnostic works were carried out inside the emergency unit. Contrary to predictions, there were no domestic or foraging robots capable of conducting reconnaissance among the ruins in huge radiation fields. If the robots did not break down at the start, they got stuck in the most appropriated places or refused to work in powerful radiation fields, all that. So the scouting was done by humans. The scout managed to walk, crawl, and most often run to many rooms of the block and set up permanent control devices there. They, in particular, did not see any meltdowns and destruction of ceilings on the lowest floors. It means that the Chinese syndrome had not yet manifested itself there. I recall that China Syndrome is a movie about an accident at an American nuclear power plant, where the fuel from the reactor burned through the concrete slabs and began to. What's under the sarcophagus? Under the old sarcophagus there is still the ill-fated exploded reactor 4, as well as a huge amount of various radioactive substances and debris were dropped by the liquidators of the accident from the roof of the nearby MPP building. It turned out that only a small part of the core fragments were preserved in the reactor shaft. The upper cover of the reactor weighing more than 2,000 tons inclined and the angle of 15 degrees, and rests on the one side on the edge of a metal tank, on the other on a reinforced concrete slab lying on it. From the lid hangs a lot of torn-off process pipes. After the explosion, the tower lid fell 4 meters, crushing the massive cross-shaped metal structure in the sub-reactor room, and about a quarter of it completely destroyed. A rubble of graphite block structural elements and fresh concrete was found at the base of the reactor, which also flooded the sub-reactor room where much of the fuel had fallen. According to some information, radioactive emissions into the atmosphere amounted to only 5% of the total amount of radioactive elements in the nuclear reactor. 55% of them are currently buried in the bowels of the destroyed reactor. When emergency responders reached a corridor at the base of the reactor in 1956, they encountered sulfate black lava. After the explosion and destruction of the cooling system, the reactor core had literally melted. Flows of radioactive lava ran through the pipes, melting concrete and steel. As a result, stalactites and stalagmites were formed, which were called elephant's foot. After discovery of this artifact, another fog became clear. Being near the elephant's foot for more than a few seconds is impossible, as it emits just crazy dust of radiation. In addition, it continues to emit heat and gradually melt the concrete beneath it, going deeper into the ground. This could trigger another contamination if it reaches the groundwater. Built in a hurry, the sarcophagus spent 30 years containing fuel radiation from the reactor. However, its ceilings and walls had already begun to deteriorate. In 2013, the hind slabs over the engine room collapsed. The sarcophagus was leaking and moisture was getting in there in large quantities. Under the influence of moisture and temperature fluctuations, containing masses inside the sarcophagus collapsed, forming a large amount of radioactive dust with a high content of long-life transitic isotopes, including the plutonium-239, which a half-life of 24,000 years. Such dust has already accumulated, according to conservative estimates, at least 1.5 tons of it. The first sarcophagus has another serious drawback. Its design does not allow handling the radioactive waste accumulated inside, but until all the stuffing of the exploded reactor is removed and utilized, this object will remain dangerous. The possibility of the old sarcophagus collapsing means that multi-ton slabs could fall on the reactor and leave radioactive material into the air, which will settle on the inner walls of the new arched protective structure, turning everything inside to a huge source of radiation. The furnace would even extend beyond the new containment structure. Under the old sarcophagus there is a huge amount of radioactive material that has been mixed with concrete, sand and other substances that were used during the liquidation of the accident. Without disposal and burial of these substances, they will constantly pose a danger to the people who work at the plant. The second option for the sarcophagus. Did you know that initially 2 designs for the sarcophagus were considered? This project it was supposed to construct around the block an independent, fully hermetic building of the huge dimensions, an arc with a span of 230 meters, or a dome with a span up to 120 meters. It is similar to the arc which is covered over Chernobyl MPP now. The second project envisaged the maximum use of preserved walls and other structures of the destroyed block for the construction of the protective shell. The newly constructed walls were to be supported on these structures. Calculations show that the work on the first option would last 1.5 years and require huge expenditures, while the work on the second option would take several months and would be considerably less expensive. Naturally, the second approach was chosen. It allowed to win significantly in the cost and the speed construction that was done. The price for the win was not only a huge collective dose received by the builders and installers, but also fundamental disadvantages of the object itself, the need to erect new structures and close proximity to the destroyed block in the huge radiation fields forced the use of remote techniques. Welding could not be used to connect many critical structures, and remote assembly did not allow large metal structures to fit together precisely. Radiation fields and debris made it impossible to access the flank of many of the supports that were subjected to explosion and fire. These structures were the main support beams to the sarcophagus itself. The use of remote concreting methods resulted in large masses of concrete reaching the designed location. The leakage in the destroyed building made it difficult or impossible to enter and explore many rooms. As for the newly erected structures, load-bearing beams, they were and execute in accordance with construction norms and rules, so strength of these structures itself is not in doubt. Their durability is limited by the lack of possibility of periodic inspection and restoration of anti-corrosion coating. Therefore, the conclusion on reliability on radiation safety on the sarcophagus of the Chernobyl NPP, submitted to the Government Commission on October 11, 1986 states. The peculiarities of the shelter facility are determined by its potential hazard, much greater than allows by the norms and regulations for facilities containing nuclear and radioactive materials. The situation is further complicated by the fact that the safety assessment of any nuclear power industrial facility is based, as a rule, on a practical experience in the operation of such or similar facilities, but a shelter facility has no such analogs. It turns that back in 1986, right after the construction of the sarcophagus, an expert conclusion was made that the sarcophagus was unreliable. In simple words, all these years, a sarcophagus stood in good word and could collapse at any moment. As a result of the 1986 accident, part of the structures of the reactor unit, the engine room was destroyed. In the western zone, it has a deviation of up to 15 centimeters. In some places, its falls are fixed. Such a condition, in case of a 4.3 magnitude earthquake, leads to the fall of part of the roof on the sarcophagus. In the southern zone, the frame, which holds a significant amount of debris and building materials, deviated from the vertical by about 1.5 meters. Although this area was reinforced with metal supports during the construction of the sarcophagus, calculations show that in the event of even the slightest earthquake, there's a risk that they could fall towards the workshop, releasing radioactive dust into the environment. Numerous cracks, sagging concrete slabs, and high radiation levels inside increase the risk of a new release of radioactive substances. Now a new structure of confinement has been installed over Shelter 1, sarcophagus. It was designed and built over a 20-year period. However, the new shelter did not solve the problem of the old sarcophagus. Throughout the operation of the old sarcophagus, studies and assessment its reliability were carried out. They showed that the old shelter has structures with a high probability of collapse. Already in recent years, work has carried out to strengthen the old sarcophagus, but even after these works, the expertise showed that the object will be able to stand no longer than 2023. That is, may collapse earlier, but it will stand at most until 2023. So we have 3 years to dismantle the old sarcophagus. 3 years is very little. It's not just the sarcophagus that has to be dismantled, it's what's underneath it. The problem is that the technique could work in those conditions had not yet been invented. No one will break solders as in 86. In the end, we have the fact that the sarcophagus hides a lot of vulnerabilities that can lead to dire consequences. Moreover, As we know now, the sarcophagus itself was built on the ruins on the 4th block, and all this good can collapse at any moment. That's all for now. Subscribe to the channel and write your comments to this video.